The 2019 winner of the Under 30 Speech Contest, Isabel.
All right, it's late, but let's have some fun. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Shoot, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I did not mean to assume your gender. I am so sorry. Okay, we'll try that again. Second time's a charm. Good evening, you guys. Dang it, I forgot. I almost lost my job on campus for saying that one. Okay, last one. We'll try one more time. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here at the Western Conservative Summit. How great has today been? For several years, I've been in attendance at this very conference, sitting right out there in the audience with you all, and I've learned a great deal about the amazing community of conservatives right here in Colorado and across our nation. I'd like to begin tonight by saying a deep and genuine thank you to the Washington Examiner and Western Conservative Summit for the opportunity to address you all. And it is especially meaningful for me to stand before you on this stage today, as I'm a native of Colorado. I grew up in Evergreen, just up the road. Yeah, great small town. And this state is where I've spent the past 4 years at Colorado State University, molding, shaping, and of course defending my beliefs in limited government, capital markets, and freedom of speech. As a recent college graduate, I am here to attest that there has perhaps been no prior generation facing a more direct assault on our freedom of expression than young Americans are facing today. Just a few months ago, I was living the leftist reality of indoctrination on my campus at Colorado State in Fort Collins, and it was a wild ride. I learned an awful lot going to the big ag school where I expected students to think just like me and vote just like me, but was often called out as that white supremacist girl or that conservative girl on campus for voicing my beliefs. It's likely that many of you have heard much about what's happening on college campuses when it comes to famous conservative politicos speaking on campus, likely through Fox News or other major media outlets. But it's really unlikely that many of you have heard about what's happening behind the scenes, that conservative students are often physically or verbally harassed by their peers and professors, that they receive failing grades on their assignments for voicing their conservative beliefs, or even what student fee and tuition dollars are being spent on in the name of diversity and social justice. These are the hidden stories of my generation. Stories that the mainstream media likely will never fully cover, but those that students like myself face each and every day right on the front lines of our higher education system. These heinous acts aren't just happening at UC Berkeley or Ivy League schools. The direct assault on freedom of speech and the suppression of our opportunity to express ourselves is happening right here in your own backyard. At Colorado State University, for example, administrators recently released an inclusive language guide, which was aimed at guiding student speech towards creating a more inclusive environment on campus for everyone who thinks on the left in the same way, that is. Included in the nearly 10-page document are offensive common words and phrases like long time no see, which is now off limits because it's supposedly racist towards those of Asian descent. Also on the list is handicapped parking. How dare you refer to it as such? To say handicapped parking insinuates that people with disabilities are not fully human. It's news to me that the term homosexual is now considered offensive. We should be calling these students gay or lesbian, while simultaneously the term straight is also considered offensive on campus, as it insinuates that students who are not straight are crooked. Thus, we should be calling straight students, you guessed it, heterosexual. Using your gender pronouns to define which of the two or thousands, according to the mainstream left, of the genders you are required to be named when you move into the dorms on campus or make an introduction in student government. If you're sitting next to your husband or wife right now, you're actually not. You're sitting next to your partner. Professors are being reprimanded and even fired for failing to use their gender pronouns in the classroom or the partner identity for their loved one. All of the mental gymnastics associated with what is considered politically correct on campus is amusing, certainly, But my amusement quickly turned to grim shock upon reading a single word at the top of the list of offensive phrases: America. The reason that it's offensive to say the word America? To say America, to describe the United States, poses a risk of potentially, theoretically, alluding that the United States of America is a better country than any other countries in North and South America. How dare we say that, right? America. For me, reading that word on the list of offensive words was the last straw. Oops, I forgot. Those are controversial in Colorado now, too. I'm a proud patriot, and I'll stick to using the name of our beautiful nation. Thank you very much, CSU. A few years ago, CSU very graciously sent me to a Women's Student Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. It began on Memorial Day, and as I was flying into our nation's capital, I was seated next to a middle-aged young woman who had boarded the plane with no baggage. She didn't even have a purse. All she had was a single bouquet of flowers. I struck up a conversation with her, asking what she would be doing in D.C., and she asked me about the conference. And towards the end of our conversation, the woman somberly smiled at me, and tears welled up in her eyes. And she quietly informed me that she would only be staying in Washington for a few hours. She would be delivering that single bouquet of flowers to her late 18-year-old son's grave at Arlington National Cemetery. At the time, I welled up with tears. It was a deeply touching moment. But looking back now, I am filled with deeply melancholy emotions, having fully understood the sacrifice that this young man gave to protect our most simple liberties, liberties like freedom of speech, while also having simultaneously graduated from a university that no longer condones the name of the country that he died to save, at the risk of offending someone somewhere on campus. Truthfully, changing minds on a college campus is not a very difficult thing to do. One doesn't have to move mountains to expose students to conservative beliefs. I simply used my voice to tell the truth. It is my belief that our nation's young adults have never been so desperate for truth, particularly in a time when we must filter between fact and fiction so frequently and in such complex ways. Teddy Roosevelt, one of my all-time favorite presidents, once described the character of the man in the arena. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Look around you. Really, really look. There are countless young Americans, from high schoolers to postgraduates, sitting among you. They may be young, but it only takes mere moments to recognize them as warriors. These are the individuals who are actually in the arena. They've been ostracized by their communities, received failing grades on their assignments, and lost countless friendships and even relationships with family along the way. It happens every single day on the front lines of our college campuses. And yet, these individuals continue to fight. They keep speaking up. They keep going to classes because they are determined to win the fight for America's future. I can speak from experience that there is so much to come from just one or two students who are willingly able to stand against the crowd of leftist insanity on campus. As a former campus activist for Turning Point USA and PragerU's student program, Prager Force, I had the luxury of setting up a table on campus once a week, passing out materials, stickers, buttons, and talking to students about conservative values as they passed between their classes. As a freshman, there was maybe a dozen students who had outed themselves as a conservative on campus, quite bravely, I might add, but I would have never been caught dead wearing a Socialism Sucks t-shirt at Colorado State University. After I was willing to stand up and take the brunt of most of the insanity on campus, however, our membership skyrocketed. We quickly had hundreds of students signing up to come to our events, attend conferences, and proudly stand for their conservative values on campus. These individuals became our new warriors in the classroom and elsewhere on campus, in student government, their dorms, and other clubs. Most importantly, because a handful of students were willing to stand up in the first place, they no longer felt isolated and alone in their beliefs. Oh, that's pretty great too, yeah. When I first attempted to host a conservative speaker on campus, Charlie Kirk, who coincidentally you'll hear from in a few moments here at this evening, I was met with extreme resistance. We're talking an angry mob of leftist students, the posting of my personal address online, individuals contacting me at my phone number with personal death threats from students and middle-aged members of the community, and even administrators demanding the canceling of the event, no questions asked. My lovely parents were so concerned for my safety that my mom actually came to college with me for a week to attend my classes to make sure that nothing bad would happen. It was very, very sweet, but honestly, no 20-year-old wants to need to have their mom come to college with them to keep them safe. We had snipers on top of the computer science building and SWAT teams on campus, for goodness sakes, and all of it made statewide news. Why? Because even though leftist and liberal speakers came to campus all the time to speak with no hubbub raised, this was the all-feared conservative viewpoint. The horror, right? Never mind the fact that Bernie Sanders had spoken on campus twice in the same time frame. Despite the backlash, thousands of students came out on campus to hear Charlie speak and attend later consequent events with Turning Point USA hosting both Candace Owens and Dennis Prager. I know for a fact that countless minds were changed and conservative values were embraced that evening. After those 4 years of navigating the leftist insanity and genuine hatred of myself and other conservative students on campus, I was deeply proud this February at CPAC to applaud our president, Donald J. Trump, as he announced the signing of his executive order calling for the reinforcement of the First Amendment on our nation's college campuses. But it can't end there. Now, it is up to our young conservatives to take that reinforcement and freely and passionately use our voices to continue to effectuate change on campus, voices that will continue to protect our First Amendment from now until the very end. I'm continuing my journey of using my voice in political activism post-graduation with PragerU, which is an organization many of you may be familiar with, and we're launching a new student video series next week. It's called On the Front Lines. This series will become the first of its kind in video format to expose student stories of leftist indoctrination and intolerance towards our identity on campus. For many students, this is the first time that someone has directly handed them the microphone to speak for themselves of what's happening on campus, and it's going to change everything. I invite you to follow along this week as our first interview is dropped. Students, if you aren't already, join us in the arena. Use your voice to advocate for conservatism on campus. I can attest, just one person willing to raise their hand in class, and even in student government, in your dorm, in clubs on campus, to say, hey, I support our president, or hey, I don't think what you're teaching is actually the truth, makes a big difference on campus. Dr. Ben Carson spoke to us this morning about using our sphere of influence, and I can attest the student sphere of influence is much more powerful than they often give us credit for. If you're not a student, help us in the fight. Join us on the front lines. We certainly can't do it alone, and we're going to need all of your support if we are to win the fight for America's future. Together, we are going to build a generation full of defenders of freedom and strong standing for individual liberty, shaping our nation and defending our way to greatness. Thank you.